When I say I remember my own death, people think it's just a 5-year-old's imagination. But I remember the room, the heat, the ash piling up against the door. I remember counting my breaths as the oxygen ran out, one thin sip of air at a time. And the worst part, I couldn't even scream for help. There wasn't enough air left to waste. My name was Livia, and the mountain took everything except my memory. You have no idea what it's like. My daughter isn't having nightmares. She's reliving her death beneath the ashes of Pompeii. She remembers clawing at the stone walls until her fingernails were gone. The doctors call it insanity. They want to lock my 5-year-old in a psych ward. They gave me no choice. To save her, I had to commit a crime. Welcome to my past life diary. Uncover the incredible stories that your soul has lived. Hit that subscribe button and let's start the adventure. That fear was an intruder in the sterile room. For weeks, it had pulsed from her daughter's silent form, a presence that hung in the air, thicker than the smell of antiseptic. The official story? 5-year-old Lucia was sick. The monitors beeped a steady, green-lined lie, insisting she was stable. But the machines were idiots. Because the machines couldn't explain the sound. It wasn't a cough from the lungs. It was the sound of dust, of dry gravel spilling into an ancient darkness. Elena, an architect who understood the breaking point of materials, heard something else in that sound. She heard ash, the sound of structural collapse. The doctors, with all their degrees and detached expressions, were clueless. They saw a sick child, but Elena saw a haunted one. Lucia's eyes, her eyes, were fixed on a point in space, seeing something that wasn't there. Her tiny hand was clenched around a single black crayon, her only connection to this world. She was drawing, over and over, filling pages with the same violent image. A crude stick figure of a girl, and a bird. The lines weren't drawn. They were gouged into the paper. This wasn't art. It was a message, a blueprint of terror Elena couldn't decipher. Dr. Bellini interrupted Elena with a sharp gesture, a slight raise of his hand. He slammed the folder with Lucia's test shut. This is not somatic, Signora Veron. Not somatic. The clinical, forward death sentence for hope. The code for, it's in her head. It's your fault. We are done. We are transferring Lucia to the psychiatric ward this afternoon. This is our final recommendation. The psychiatric ward, a prison within a prison. They were giving up. They couldn't find the cause, so they were going to drug the symptoms. Erase her daughter until the drawings and the ash cough stopped. No, absolutely not. You find nothing, so you blame her? You'll drug her until she's a zombie in there. Her husband Marco was fighting, but Elena knew the battle was already lost. The system was closing in. Logic had failed her. All her belief in blueprints, in order, in a world that made sense, it crumbled into dust. And that's when it happened. The shouting, the confined space, it was the trigger. Back in the ward, Lucia's small body went rigid. Her eyes flew open, filled with an ancient, impossible terror. She sat bolt upright, and from her tiny frame came a sound that was not a child's cry. It was a guttural wail from the depths of history. Livia, non c'è aria. And as the men stood frozen, Elena saw it. A nurse from the transfer team, preparing a syringe. A sedative, the final lock in the door of their prison. That tiny glint of the needle under the fluorescent lights broke something inside Elena. The architect, the logician, the planner, she was gone. Only the mother remained. Only the animal instinct to protect her young. It wasn't a decision. It was a detonation. In one fluid, violent motion, Elena lunges, rips the sensors from Lucia's chest, snatches her daughter from the bed, shoves the stunned nurse aside. She's a blur past her husband, past the doctor. Elena, what in God's name are you doing? Security, stop her. Sicurezza. She hears none of it. Only the KHH of Lucia's cough against her chest. That is her new true north. She sprints down the corridor. The heavy steel doors at the end are closing, the automatic lockdown. She's not going to make it, but the elevator doors to her right are open. A silent steel box. A getaway. She throws herself inside, slamming the closed door button again. She sees Marco's terrified face as he rounds the corner. The guards are right behind him. Elena, no. She had just abducted her own daughter. She was a criminal, a fugitive with no plan, stuck at a traffic light. The full weight of her actions crashes down on her. What had she done? Her hand trembles, searching for Lucia's notebook on the floor. She grabs it. She needs an answer, a blueprint, something, anything that an architect can read. And in the yellow gloom, something clicks. Her professional eye, trained to see history in stone, finally sees. She wasn't looking at what Lucia drew. She should have been looking at how she drew it. The style. It was a specific, recognizable style of crude graffiti. A term from an old university lecture surfaces in her mind. Locus horridus. The rough, angry scratching of Roman legionaries, of slaves, of children. This wasn't a drawing. It was an inscription. And Elena had seen this exact style before. Not in a museum. Not in a textbook. She had seen it scratched into the ancient, excavated walls of Pompeii. It wasn't madness. It wasn't hysteria. Lucia wasn't crazy. Lucia was remembering. Elena Verone floored the accelerator, shooting forward into the night. She wasn't running away anymore. She was running towards a 2,000-year-old nightmare, towards the only place she might find the truth. She was heading for the mountain. She was heading for Pompeii. A high-frequency hum vibrated just under Elena Verone's skin, so loud in her ears she was shocked the old Fiat wasn't shaking apart. She was racing south, away from Naples, toward the silent, looming shadow of Vesuvius. Her knuckles were bone white on the steering wheel. Her eyes darted from the blurred road to the rearview mirror. Every set of headlights was them. Every blue light was a carabinieri patrol, sirens screaming, coming to take Lucia. Marco, her husband, would have already reported her. He was a man of systems of authorities. In his panic, he would see his wife, the rational architect, as the one who had finally, structurally, collapsed. He would try to save Lucia from her. The thought was a jolt of acid rage. In the back, Lucia's breath was a shallow, hoarse rhythm. KHH. In a claustrophobic car, the sound wasn't pathetic anymore. It was percussive, a dry thud, like a handful of volcanic dust dropped on a drum skin. Elena's right hand rested on the drawing on the passenger seat. The girl and the bird. It was her only map, her blueprint. Her entire career was spent analyzing the past, restoring what was broken. She understood the mechanics of collapse. A building doesn't just fall, it fails. Now, her world had failed. Medicine, science, her own husband, all had collapsed. The only thing left standing was this impossible knowledge, scratched on a paper by her 5-year-old daughter. The highway sign for Pompeii Scavi loomed. The tourist exit. She flicked her turn signal. A fugitive. An architect. A mother. She needed a plan. The hospital was a reaction. This had to be an action. She slowed for the ramp, aiming for the main entrance. Nolki, not here. Elena's foot slammed the brake. A horn blared behind her. The voice came from the back seat. It was Lucia's voice, but it was not. It was too low, too certain, too old. Elena's blood ran cold. She stared into the rear-view mirror. Lucia was sitting bolt upright, her eyes wide, empty, looking through her at the road ahead. Lucia. Elena whispered. L'altra casa. Lucia wheezed. Vez guttural. Asci. The other house. What house, amore? Indietro. Lucia commanded. Back. The one with the cup. This wasn't delirium. It was authority. A terrifying authority radiating from the frail body in her back seat. Her logical mind screamed in protest. This was impossible. She was taking directions from a memory. But logic had failed. Elena obeyed. She wrenched the wheel, swerving back onto the highway, past the tour buses and souvenir stands. She followed the road as it curved, heading for a small, lesser-known entrance. An entrance for staff and restoration crews. An entrance Lucia Veron had no way of knowing existed. She parked in a dusty lot, pulled down her sunglasses to hide her haunted eyes, and bought 2 tickets. The mundane act felt like a dream. She tried to carry Lucia, but the child, who had been weak for weeks, broke free. Her small sneakers landed on the ancient cobblestones. Lucia did not wander. Lucia led. She moved with an inhuman determination, a frightening focus, pulling her mother through the maze of ruins. Elena, the architect, was disoriented. She was being led through her own territory by a 5-year-old. Lucia ignored the forum, the amphitheater, the famous villas. She was heading deep into a less visited section of the city, her little legs pumping with a relentless rhythm. Then she stopped. They were at a dead end. The murmur of tourists was gone. Only the wind whistled through the hollowed-out ruins. In front of them, a rusty rope fence and a faded red sign, Area Reservata. Access forbidden. Behind it, crumbling, overgrown ruins. A failed excavation. Elena's heart sank. It was nothing. A delusion. But Lucia pointed. Her small finger was rock steady, aimed at a dark, soot-stained cornerstone at the base of a wall. Elena squinted, her expert eye kicking in. The inscription was almost gone, but she could just make it out. Corso della Coppa d'Oro. Casa della Coppa d'Oro. The House of the Golden Cup. Her breath caught in her chest. She knew this house, a minor site known only to academics. A house whose structural report she had reviewed years ago. A house whose name Lucia had known in the car. "We can't be here," Elena whispered, but Lucia was already under the rope. Elena scrambled after her. Lucia ran past the atrium straight to a dead end. A solid, ugly wall of rough Roman concrete. A place where excavators had given up and walled off a collapse. Lucia began to claw at the stone. Her fingernails scraped against the abrasive surface. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Elena's blood froze. It was the same sound. The exact same sound as the cough. The dry, gravelly, hopeless sound of ash. The wall didn't yield. Lucia's frustration, her ancient, bottled-up terror, erupted in a shrill, animal cry that cut through the silence. It was a sound of 2,000-year-old grief. Livia, she's here. Equi. The name from the hospital. Lucia beat the wall with her tiny fists, a pathetic thud against the unmoving stone. Non c'è aria. She collapsed against the wall, her body convulsing and dry, ragged sobs. And in that moment, Elena's architectural mind, desperate for a rational hypothesis, seized one. Lucia wasn't Livia. Lucia was haunted by Livia. This was a possession. A girl trapped behind this wall. The blueprint was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. She wasn't here to find a memory. She was here to perform an exorcism. A sharp whistle shattered her revelation. Heavy boots on gravel. 2 security guards rounded the corner, and behind them, a man with eyes the color of glacial ice. Dr. Rossi, the chief archaeologist, the gatekeeper. His gaze swept the scene, ignoring Elena, ignoring the sobbing child. It locked with furious precision on the fresh scratch marks Lucia's fingernails had left on the ancient stone. His face turned to granite. Elena rushed forward, a trembling shield between Rossi and her daughter. "Doctor, I am Elena Verone, the architect. My daughter, she's sick. She's possessed." The words sounded insane. She pulled out the crumpled drawing. "A child is buried here. A girl named Livia. She's trapped. Please, you must believe me." Dr. Rossi didn't even glance at the drawing. His eyes moved from the scratches on the wall to Elena's face, filled with a cold, profound disgust. "Possessed." His voice was steel. "This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Signora Verone. Not a stage for your personal psychodrama." He pointed a dirt-caked finger at the scratches. "You invaded a restricted area, and you have damaged the facility. Do you understand what you have done?" "No. The child, Livia, she's in there." Dr. Rossi physically blocked her path, a wall as solid as the one behind him. He gave a sharp nod to the guards. "Escort Signora Verone from the premises." Immediately, their hands gripped her arms, rough, bruising. "No, wait. You have to listen." They dragged her away. She twisted, watching as Lucia, her strange energy gone, collapsed at the foot of the wall, a small pile of blankets racked by that dry, hacking ash cough. In a shabby hotel room smelling of stale smoke and defeat, Elena watched her daughter. Lucia lay on the hideous orange bedspread, her breathing dangerously shallow. And then it stopped. The ash cough stopped. The silence was terrifying. Lucia's body suddenly arched off the mattress, her eyes rolling back. This wasn't a seizure. Her small body was shutting down. "Lucia." She fumbled for the phone. "Subito. Un medico. Mia figlia sta morendo." "A doctor. My daughter is dying." An old, local doctor arrived. His eyes were not cold like the others. They were full of weary pity. He examined Lucia, listened to her chest, and shook his head. "Her body is shutting down," he said softly. "Shock. Exhaustion. She needs a hospital. Now." "No," Elena whispered. "They'll lock her up." The doctor sighed. "To be honest, Signora, I do not know if it matters." He gently placed Lucia's hand back on the bedspread. "She has hours left. Maybe a day." Hours. Elena stared at her daughter, a pale ghost on a hideous landscape. She looked at her backpack in the corner. Her architect's toolkit, her hammer, her chisels, her tools of restoration, her tools of deconstruction. Dr. Rossi would not help. The law would not help. Marco would not help. If Elena Verone wanted to save Lucia, Elena had to go through that wall. Hours left, maybe a day. The doctor's words were a hammer, shattering the last structures of Elena Verone's sanity. Panic, cold and sticky, rose in her throat, threatening to swallow her whole. She had failed. The trip had failed. Her daughter was a ghost on the hideous orange bedspread, and she was utterly, completely defeated. The panic was a wave, about to break and drown her. But it didn't. Instead, the dread solidified. It hardened into something cold, diamond-hard, and familiar. The weeping mother was shoved aside. The architect took over. This was not a medical problem. Bellini had proven that. This was not an archaeological problem. Rossi had proven that. This was a structural problem. The memory was the blueprint. The wall was the flaw. And the doctors, the guards, the husbands, they were just incompetent contractors. Elena crawled to her work bag and pulled out her laptop. The machine was solid, logical. She opened it, the blue-white light illuminating the bruised circles under her eyes. She was an architect. She would find the original plans. Her fingers, which had been trembling, now flew across the keyboard with muscle-memorized precision. She connected to the hotel's unstable Wi-Fi. Every spin of the connection icon was a breath Lucia might not take. It connected. She didn't Google reincarnation. She went straight to the secure restores archive of the University of Naples. This wasn't hacking. This was access. She had the clearance. She dove deep into the server drives, into the raw data not meant for the public. She searched for the Casa della Capodoro. The results were all modern, all showing the same solid dead-end wall. No. She was wrong. A hysterical mother chasing a ghost while her daughter died of a conventional illness. She glanced at Lucia. The child was so still. Too still. Then the cough. A whisper. KHH. Elena's focus narrowed. Think like a restorer. The modern maps were simplified. She needed the original excavation data. Before the concrete plugs. Before the tidy, bureaucratic history that Rossi managed. She tried a different query. Not the house name. The grid reference. Reggio Sai, Insula 16, Porta 7. The server churned. And then she saw it. A forgotten directory. Scans pre-unification. Scans from before the modern state of Italy even existed. She clicked. One file name leaped out. Mappa Borbonic _edge 0.6 _1840.pdf. A Bourbon era map. Hand-drawn. The original blueprint. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the high-resolution image slowly loaded. She zoomed in, her fingers slipping on the trackpad. She found it. The House of the Golden Cup. And it was different. Her breath caught in her throat. The modern maps were lies. They're exactly where Lucia had clawed the wall, exactly where the solid concrete stood now. The map showed a small, shaded square. The key was clear. Cubiculum. A bedroom. A small, windowless sleeping chamber. Her eyes scanned the faded script in the margins, an annotation from the original 19th century excavator. And she found the word. A neat, precise, handwritten note. Crollo. Collapsed. Elena let out a strangled, tearing gasp. The wall wasn't original. It was a modern plug built to seal off a dangerous collapse. Lucia hadn't been clawing at a wall. She had been clawing at a door. It wasn't a delusion. It was a structural fact, proven by history. Lucia was right. Elena hit print. The hotel's ancient printer groaned to life, agonizingly slow. The paper emerged, a gray, muddy smudge, but it was there. The proof. She didn't grab her bag, didn't put on her shoes. She bolted from the room, leaving the door wide open, sprinting down the hall in her socks, clutching the wet paper. It was her weapon. She burst into the lobby, a wild woman, and ran barefoot across the street toward the park. She flashed her professional ID at the gate and sprinted against the flow of tourists, a blur of gray sweater and focused rage. She slammed open the door to Dr. Rossi's office. He was at his desk, meticulously piecing together ancient pottery shards. His peaceful, orderly day. Elena slammed the sweat-soaked printout on his desk, scattering the priceless fragments. Rossi's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with pure fury. "Look!" Elena gasped, her lungs burning. Her fingers stabbed the paper. "It's on your own maps. 1840s. A cubiculum. Right here. Mark collapsed. The wall isn't original. Lucia was right. You have to open it. Now." Dr. Rossi did not flinch. Slowly, with an infuriating, theatrical calm, he set down the shard he was holding. He picked up his reading glasses. He cleaned them on his shirt. He put them on. Then, he looked at the map. Elena watched his face, her entire world in the balance. She saw the flicker of recognition in his icy eyes. He knew it was genuine. He saw the cubiculum. He saw the note. Crollo. Hope, so bright it was painful, surged through her. He sees it. He has to. Dr. Rossi's gaze lifted from the map. He looked at her wild eyes, her stringy hair, her bare, dirty feet on his floor. He wasn't seeing a colleague who had made a discovery. He was seeing a threat, a hysterical woman, an administrative nightmare. He sighed, a heavy, long-suffering sigh. Then, he reached for the beige telephone on his desk. The hope inside Elena froze, then turned to ice. This wasn't the action of a man about to call a work crew. She brought him facts. He was answering with power. He picked up the receiver, pinning her with his cold gaze as he dialed a 3-digit extension. Security. His voice was calm. Bored. Signora Verone is in my office again. Elena shook her head, a silent, pleading no. Escort her from the territory. Rossi continued, watching her face crumble. Then his expression hardened. No, wait. He held her gaze. If Signora Verone returns, call the carabinieri. Have her arrested for trespassing. Capito. He hung up the phone. A solid, final click. The sound of the lock. The sound of the tomb. The guards entered. This time, their faces were not hesitant. They took her arms. The fight had left her. She was just a woman who had failed. As they marched her out, past the staring tourists, she heard one of them ask, what did she do? Steal something? She was the crazy lady. The spectacle. Dr. Rossi had won. Elena stumbled back to the cheap hotel, numb. She walked down the hallway and reached her room. The door was ajar, just as she had left it in her hopeful sprint. She pushed it open. Her world stopped. The room was empty. Lucia was gone. The hideous orange bedspread was pulled tight, the corners tucked. The bed was made. The notebook, the crayons, the clothes, all gone. Elena ran to the bed. The air smelled wrong. Not just smoke and lemon cleaner. It was antiseptic, the sterile, chemical smell of the Naples hospital. They had been here. Her phone rang, a violent sound in the dead, silent room. An unknown number. She answered. Elena. It was Marco. He wasn't angry. He was sobbing. A raw, broken sound. Elena. Dio mio. I had to. I called the police. I told them where you were. The betrayal slammed into place. While she was fighting Rossi, they were here. The ambulance, they tracked your phone. Marco choked out. They took her. They took her back to Naples. To the hospital. Elena's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, sinking onto the foul carpet. They're taking her to the psychiatric ward. Marco wept. Right now. Elena, they're locking her up. The phone slipped from her numb fingers. She was alone. A fugitive. A failure. And Lucia was locked up. Dying. 30 kilometers away from the only place that could save her. She had lost. The logical architect was dead. She had died in a cheap hotel room, listening to the sobbing betrayal of her husband. The woman who believed in blueprints was a fool. The world was not rational. The world was chaos, and men like Bellini, like Rossi, like Marco, were its agents, hiding behind their systems while her daughter died. The mother, the animal, was all that remained. Her career was a scorched ruin. Her marriage, a collapsed structure. Her reputation, ash. The Carabinieri were looking for her. She had lost everything, which meant she had nothing left to lose. She sat in the cold, damp dark of her Fiat Panda, jammed into a lightless alley near the ruins of Pompeii. It was 2:47 a.m. The police would be looking for her at the hospital in Naples. They would assume she had fled. They would not assume she was running toward the fire. The architect was dead, but her skills remained. They were no longer tools. They were weapons. Lucia was 30 kilometers away, being sealed in a modern tomb. And a single thought, a growl from her daughter's memory, echoed in her head. Non dovevi chiudermi. You shouldn't have locked me up. Elena's hand unzipped her work bag. Her fingers found the cold steel, the rubber grip of her geological hammer, an S-wing, a tool for delicate, precise work. Now it was a key. She watched the clock on the dash. 2:58 a.m. The hour of ghosts. She opened the car door. The click was a gunshot in the silent alley. At 3 a.m., she abandoned the car. The cold air shocked her lungs. She moved like a shadow, sneakers silent on the wet pavement, the muffled clink of steel in the bag on her shoulder. She avoided the main entrance, heading north along the perimeter. She was not a tourist. She was an architect. She knew its weaknesses. She reached a section of fence she had noted in a survey years ago, a weak spot buckled by a fallen pine, never properly repaired. The street was empty. She slung the bag over the sagging wire, yanked it free when it caught. She climbed, her body moving with practiced efficiency. Barbed wire tore at her sweater, scratched her hand. She ignored the sting and dropped silently onto the ancient cobblestones inside the park. She was in. Pompeii at night was not a theme park of history. It was a tomb, a black, silent, sprawling necropolis. The wind whispered through skeletal ruins. It was the sound of ghosts. But Elena was not afraid of ghosts. She was the one doing the haunting. She moved through the black shadows. The blueprint of the city burned into her mind. She reached the sagging rope of the area riservata and stepped over it. She was in the house of the Golden Cup. It was blacker here. A void. Elena stood before the wall. The lock. She dropped her backpack, and her hand closed around the hammer. For one agonizing second, the architect screamed. This was sacrilege, vandalism, a crime against everything she believed in. Her entire life was built on saving these stones, not shattering them. Her hand trembled. She couldn't do it. KH. The sound. Lucia's cough. In her head. The doctor's words. Hours left. The psychiatric ward. Bellini's cold, triumphant eyes. The architect died. The mother struck the wall. Crack. The sound was an explosion in the dead city. The force of the blow vibrated up her arm. She placed the tip of a long steel chisel against the new wound. She raised the hammer. Crack. 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 She was no longer an architect. She was a demolition crew, sobbing with each blow. Crack. Let. Crack. Fur. Crack. Go. Her frantic rhythm was answered by a modern, shrill, electronic shriek. An alarm. Then, a blinding white floodlight pinned her in place. Ferma. Polizia. Ferma. Shouts. Boots on gravel, running. Before she could strike again, they were on her. State police. The carabinieri. They wrenched the hammer from her grip, tore the chisel away, and slammed her shoulder first against the very wall she was trying to destroy. And standing behind them, his face a mask of cold, vindicated fury, was Dr. Rossi. I told you, Signora Verone. His voice was low with disgust. I warned you. I told him you would come. She fought like a wild animal, thrashing, sobbing, not in defeat, but in pure rage. She is dying, she screamed, focusing all her fury on him. And you are letting it happen. With a final surge of strength, she wrenched one hand free, grabbed her phone, and shoved it in Rossi's face. Look at her, she shrieked, her thumb jabbing the screen. You did this. She hit play. The video she'd taken at the hotel. Lucia's tiny body, convulsing on the orange bedspread. Her eyes rolled back in agony. But the audio was the true horror. The dry, rasping, scratching sound, amplified by the phone's small speaker. KH, KH, KH. Listen, Elena screamed, her voice cracking. It's not a cough. It's ash. The carabinieri's grip went slack. They were Neapolitans. They knew sickness. This sound was unnatural. Dr. Rossi froze. His academic certainty, his bureaucratic wall, it all cracked. He was an archaeologist. He had spent his life sifting volcanic soil. He knew that sound. It was the sound of lapilli, of fine, abrasive grit. His entire worldview shattered. Wait, Rossi murmured. He walked past the cops, his eyes no longer on Elena, but on the wall. He knelt, touching the edges of the hole she'd made. He scraped the mortar with his own fingernail. He was no longer a gatekeeper. He was an academic, seeing a structure that didn't make sense. You're an architect? He growled at her. You hammer like a child. He snatched her hammer from the ground and pointed, not at the hole, but at a faint seam. Look, the mortar. This joint is 20th century. A cheap Portland mix. But this, he scraped the inner stone. This is Roman, Vitruvian. It was sealed from the inside. Before anyone could react, he raised the hammer. He struck the wall not with brute force, but with a single, precise, calculated blow on the modern seam. Crack. The sound was different. A structural fracture. A hiss of gray dust rushed out. He hit it again. A large stone groaned, tipped, and fell inward, crashing into blackness. A dark void opened in the wall. Rossi grabbed a flashlight and shined the beam inside. The light cut through 2,000 years of darkness. It revealed a small, sealed room. A tomb. In the far corner, curled in the fetal position, was the tiny skeleton of a child. And on the wall directly above it, scratched into the plaster, a crude, angry drawing of a girl. And a bird. It was identical to Lucia's. Rossi's hand was shaking. The tiny skeletal hand was not empty. It was clutched around a sharp fragment of black stone. Obsidian, Rossi breathed. He violated every rule he had ever lived by. He dropped the flashlight, got on his knees, and reached his arm into the sacred void. The snap of ancient finger bones was sickeningly audible. He pulled his hand out. He was holding the cold, black, lethally sharp piece of volcanic glass. He shoved the stone into Elena's hand. Go. His voice was a low, guttural command. The cop stared, confused. Rossi turned on them, the gatekeeper once more. This is an official excavation. You saw nothing. This woman is a consultant. This is a medical emergency. Now go. I will handle this. Elena ran. She didn't look back. She scrambled out of the sight, the sharp obsidian digging into her palm, a physical anchor in a world that had dissolved. She ran through the dead, moonlit streets of Pompeii, a ghost fleeing a tomb. The 30-kilometer drive to Naples wasn't a drive. It was a possession. The Fiat screamed, running red lights, mounting curbs. She abandoned the car, engine still running, in the ambulance bay of the Naples hospital. She burst through the emergency room doors, ran to the elevators, and hammered on the locked door of the psychiatric ward. An orderly opened a crack. She shoved past him. She ran down the pale green corridor, ignoring the shouts of security. She found Lucia's room and burst in. Lucia was a small, still form on the bed, a sedative drip snaking in her tiny arm. Elena lunged past the orderlies. She didn't just remove the four. She ripped the needle from Lucia's arm. She grabbed her daughter's limp palm and pressed the cold, sharp, 2,000-year-old piece of obsidian into it. The moment the volcanic glass touched Lucia's skin, her small body joked a violent electric shock. The ash cough. It stopped. The silence was absolute. Lucia's eyes snapped open. They were not a child's eyes. They were ancient, cold, and filled with a bottomless, 2,000-year-old rage. A low growl rumbled in her 5-year-old chest, and she spoke, in perfect gutter Latin. Non dovevi chiudermi. You shouldn't have locked me up. A final, shuddering breath. And as quickly as it came, the ancient soul was gone. The fire in her eyes extinguished. The tension left her body. Lucia's eyes focused. For the first time in months, they were clear. They were her. They focused on Elena. Her breath was clean. Mama, Lucia whispered in her normal 5-year-old voice. I am hungry.